My name is Brandy. I'm standing in the hallway outside the dining room of my parents' house. The air is thick with an unspoken truth, and the silence is almost palpable. Just moments ago, at the dinner table, my grandfather dropped a bombshell. You've been getting disability payments for years. Every face turned towards me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, and the air seemed to tighten around me. I managed to whisper, "What do you mean?" That's when I noticed the man behind my grandfather, holding a closed folder. My parents, Carol and David, refused to meet my eyes. As I reflect on this moment, I'm taken back to my childhood. I grew up in a middle-class family in a suburb. My parents were very status-conscious. Carol was a control freak, always wanting to present a perfect image to the world. David, on the other hand, was more of a silent accomplice, going along with whatever Carol said. I have a younger sister named Lily. She was the apple of my parents' eyes. While I was the one who had to learn to be self-sufficient from a young age, Lily was showered with love and attention. When I was 13, I wanted to join a science club. The enrollment fee was $40. I showed the form to my mom and she said, "We can't afford such luxuries right now." But weeks later, when Lily wanted to go to a horse riding camp that cost over $300, my mom didn't hesitate to sign her up. As we got older, the disparity between us only grew. When I was in high school, my laptop crashed. I asked my dad if I could get a new one. He snapped, "You're just not tech savvy enough. Use the school's computers." But when Lily's phone got a crack, my parents bought her the latest model the next day. Then came the accident. I was working at a local diner, and I slipped on a wet floor. I injured my back terribly. My recovery was slow, and I often had to take painkillers. I showed my first prescription to my mom, thinking she'd be concerned. Instead, she said, "You've got to toughen up, Brandy. Stop being so weak." And that became the norm. I was constantly reminded that I should be more self-reliant. College was no better. Lily was sent to an expensive private college across the state, and my parents boasted about it to all their friends. I, on the other hand, went to a community college nearby and worked part-time at a bookstore to make ends meet. When my textbook for an art history class was too expensive, I had to borrow it from the library and photocopy pages. Meanwhile, Lily was hired a personal tutor for an elective she was struggling with. One night, after a long shift at the bookstore, I came home with a splitting back pain. I placed my crumpled prescription on the counter next to an almost empty bottle of painkillers. My mom was making dinner, cooking a fancy steak for the family. I asked, "Mom, can you help me buy the next batch of these pills?" She didn't even turn around and said, "You're strong enough to handle it, Brandy. Don't be a drama queen." I looked at the new marble countertops and the shiny new appliances in the kitchen, and I knew then that I didn't matter to them as much as Lily did. I didn't argue. I just nodded and put the prescription away. Back at the dinner table on that fateful night, the conversation was flowing superficially. Lily was talking about her upcoming cruise with her friends, and my parents were smiling and nodding, completely engrossed in her stories. I just sat there, trying to keep my hands steady. My grandfather, who has always been the wise and observant one in the family, didn't say a word for a long time. Then he repeated, "You've been getting disability payments for years." This time, the words hit me like a ton of bricks. A cousin looked at me questioningly, and Lily scowled, as if I was ruining her moment. I excused myself and walked out into the hallway. There, in a well-lit frame, was a photo of my parents and Lily. I wasn't in it. I reached for my canvas bag, which always carried my proof of my struggles, receipts of medical pays, a nearly empty prescription bottle, and a notebook where I kept track of all my medical expenses. I went into the bathroom and sat on the closed toilet lid. I opened my notebook and saw the long list of dates, numbers, and expenses. I remembered all those sleepless nights, calculating how to stretch my money so that I could afford my next dose of medicine. I pulled out my phone and, as expected, there were no messages from my parents asking where I was. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the past year. There were no mysterious deposits, nothing like the disability payments my grandfather had mentioned. A cold clarity washed over me. I typed an email to the benefits office. Hello, I'm writing to request a full history of disability payments issued under my name. Please confirm all addresses on file. Thank you. When I returned to the dining room, I just stood by the doorway. My grandfather was still at his end of the table, arms crossed. The man with the folder, an auditor named Mr. Thompson, hired by my grandfather, was still standing behind him. My parents were pretending that nothing had happened, and Lily was back to scrolling on her phone. I could have confronted them right then and there, asked them why they took what was meant for me, why they let me suffer while they spoiled Lily. But I chose silence. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair and put it on. My grandfather gave me a knowing look. He didn't need to say anything. He knew I was leaving on my own terms. Outside, the cold air stung my throat. I walked to the end of the driveway and took out the stack of receipts from my bag. The wind tried to snatch them away, but I held them tightly. All these years, I've survived without the support that was supposedly mine. When I got back to my small apartment in the city later that night, I spread out all my papers on the floor. I sat there in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I started creating a spreadsheet on my laptop, filling in the dates, amounts, and all the details of my expenses. I also added a column for the estimated disability support I should have received. When I calculated the total amount for 10 years, which came to over $320,000, I felt nothing but a sense of relief as the truth settled in. Around midnight, my email chimed. The benefits office had acknowledged my request. I stared at the screen and then at the papers around me. I whispered to the empty room, "I won't fix what they've broken." The next day, when I returned to my parents' house, the driveway was full of cars, as if they were having a big celebration. I walked in, and the dining room looked exactly the same as the night before. My parents were sitting in the center, Lily was next to my mom, scrolling on her phone, my grandfather was at the far end, and Mr. Thompson was standing behind him with the folder. My grandfather said, "Let's get this done." His voice was firm and authoritative. My mom tried to interrupt. "Dad, can we not do this now? Brandy is clearly..." My grandfather raised his hand, and she fell silent. Mr. Thompson stepped forward and opened the folder. Inside were neatly arranged papers for 10 years. He placed the first sheet on the table. It showed monthly payments under my name, but the address was my parents'. He kept placing sheet after sheet, and with each one, the truth became more apparent. My mom's face turned pale, and Lily stopped scrolling. My dad leaned back, his arms crossed tightly. "We used that money for the family," he mumbled. Mr. Thompson calmly asked, "For your luxury vacations? For the new car you bought last year?" My mom stammered. "We had expenses." Lily's college was expensive. But the numbers on the papers spoke louder than her words. Finally, Mr. Thompson placed the summary sheet on the table, showing the total of over $320,000 in disability payments that were rerouted to my parents' account. My grandfather pushed back his chair and said, "Anything to say?" My mom's voice cracked. "We thought she didn't need it. She's so independent." My grandfather interrupted. "You told everyone she was lazy and irresponsible. You let her suffer while you lived in comfort." My dad looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and shame. "We were going to tell you, eventually." But the silence that followed was heavier than any words could be. Mr. Thompson closed the folder and said, "The accounts linked to these deposits will be frozen pending investigation. Brandy will be contacted directly regarding restitution." My grandfather turned to me and said, "You don't have to stay here. You don't owe them anything." I nodded to myself. I picked up my coat and walked out of the house, leaving behind a family that had taken so much from me. My grandfather drove me back to my apartment in silence. When he dropped me off, he said, "They won't touch another dollar. Not one." I nodded, holding the folder of evidence he had given me in my bag. Inside my apartment, I placed the folder on the counter. Looking at it, I thought about all the pain and struggle I had endured. This silence, this truth, was finally mine. I no longer had to live in the shadow of the false narrative my parents had created. I could now breathe, free from their suffocating hold. And from now on, I would choose my own story,